Jan Matthews, and I'm part of the ISLES team. And we have a special guest for you guys today. We so appreciate our partnership with Unity Point. You know, you guys, most of you guys were here when Pat spoke over at the other location at, I'm trying to remember, it was at Lutheran Hospital anyway. So today, we thought it would be a great topic to talk about professional boundaries, which any of us in healthcare, which I've been in a long time as well, always need refreshers on that, don't we? That's just a hard one because we care for families, we care for lives. And so we were very fortunate to have found Diane here, McClanahan. I always want to mispronounce your name. Diane McClanahan. She is from the Des Moines Pastoral Care Counseling Center. And that counseling center has been a real find for us. I just had no idea all the things that they do until Diane gave me a tour and showed me some of it. So on that note, I will give the microphone over to Diane and enjoy the presentation. And thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jan. Can you all hear me? Yes? Okay, wonderful. Let me know if that stops. I think this is as much for the recording as for you. So I'm a pastor person, and so I've learned to project. And if you need me to do that more, just let me know. Just wave your hands, okay? I'm grateful to be here. I consider myself as being in my third career. I started out as a registered nurse and worked for about 20 years in the healthcare field, and then felt a nudge toward ministry. And when I went into ministry, I thought for sure I would be a hospital chaplain or hospice chaplain, so I did my chaplaincy training in a hospice setting. So when I was a nurse, I did some on-call work for a visiting nurse association and ended up working in hospice care an awful lot. And then as a pastor, funny thing, I ended up in a parish instead of actually working in a chaplaincy kind of situation. I ended up at the bedside of many, many folks as they were transitioning from this life to what I see as the next. So it is a topic that's quite familiar to me. Then I morphed into the work that I do now. I work for the Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center. You have, many of you may not already have it at your seats. You should have a folder of materials for today, but there's also a little flyer with a butterfly on top of it that talks about the Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center and what we do. So I invite you to explore that. I think a lot of people in the community think, oh, that's that counseling center that takes care of pastors. And that's a very limiting view of who we are and what we do. So you can see some of the broad range of services that we provide, including work with folks of all ages who have faith or no faith at all, various different faith traditions, or they just come because they want counseling for themselves or for members of their family. So I invite you to explore that and check it out. Thank you very much to ISLES Funeral Home, especially to Jan for scoping this out, coming and visiting with me, and just for this beautiful space to be able to do this. So I just want to know a little bit about who all you are, and we can't do that going around the room, would take up our whole time. So I'm just wondering if we could do some sort of show of hands according to the work that you do. So just name, somebody, would you just name your own work, and then we'll get a show of hands for that. So, like nurses? Do we have nurses in the room? Yeah, okay. Who else do we have here? Home health physical therapists. How many of those? One. Who else is in here? Hospice chaplains. Yay. Okay, how many? That's what I thought I was going to do. All right, not doing it. So how many do we have? 3? Thank you. Who else is here? Social workers. How many of those? Yay. All right, who have we missed? Hospice volunteers. Wonderful. Thank you. Who do we have? Okay. What did we miss? OT. Oh, full range, right? OT. Anybody else who's an OT? Okay. All right. Anybody else missing? Yes. Bereavement counselor. Thank you for your work. Anybody else a bereavement counselor? Wonderful. Anybody else? Massage therapist. Yay. All right. I know where I'm going next. Okay. Okay. Anybody we miss? Music therapist. Oh, I just love this group. This is wonderful. So who's the music therapist? One. Okay. Anybody else? Great. So thank you. Thank you for being and doing all that you do. I think it's in the combination of all the different disciplines that we can do the work that we do for the folks that we serve. And it's so important to recognize that we're not doing this alone and have so many other folks that we can call upon for various aspects of this work. So I want to just share with you just very briefly, we have an hour together, and it will go very fast. I am used to doing one of the roles that I'm a spiritual director at the Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center. I'm not a therapist, but I'm responsible also for a lot of continuing education and professional development, multidisciplinary professional development. And one of the things I get to do is boundary training for clergy. Very important topic, and we do that for several denominations across the state. We normally take about 6.5 hours to do this work. So we have an hour today, and needless to say, with an hour, I think we're going to do a little snorkeling, not deep scuba diving, okay, into any of the topics. We're going to stay on the surface as much as we can today, and obviously, if you want to have more on this topic another time, we can go deeper, but this will just cover the surface. So what we're going to try to do today, here's our objectives, is to gain some self-awareness. I already asked as you came in, and some of you may have come in and not seen it, but there's a little self-assessment tool that's in your packet. We in healthcare, in the healthcare world, are very good at caring for others, and a lot of what we'll be talking today about is caring for ourselves, because it's kind of like the airline professional who tells you when the oxygen mask comes down, what? Put it on yourself before you try to help someone else. So looking at how we care for ourselves is critical to being able to keep good boundaries. So there is a self-care assessment in there. You do not need to share the results with anyone, but it's for you. It's for your own learning. And in the back of that, there's a little bit, a mini care plan. We're all used to doing those things for other people. How about for ourselves? So we'll be looking at that, and I'm hoping that you will complete that before you leave today. The other thing we want to do, boundary training often is all about do's and don'ts. Here's what you can do, here's the limit, here's what you can't do, right? Today we're going to talk about something very different. We're going to be talking about the intrapersonal, what goes on inside of yourself that makes you a little bit more at risk for crossing boundaries. So we'll be looking at factors that lead to increased risk. And the other thing we'll do is just recognize that we in the professions that you all are in and with the clientele that you're working with, your patients, you're all much more at risk for compassion fatigue. So we'll spend a little bit of time reviewing what's that? And how do I know if I have that? What are the symptoms of compassion fatigue? And then finally, one of the things that's really helped me to understand how to keep within my bounds is to recognize the difference between helping, fixing, and serving. So if we can accomplish that in an hour, that'll be pretty good. And I'll be doing a lot of blah, blah, blah up here to begin with, but I want to leave space toward the end for us to have some Q&A and maybe even just look at a case together that's in your packet. Okay? Questions as we start? All good? All right. So before we even delve any deeper into the topic, I think it's important for us to just get a sense of what on earth are we talking about. Do we all have a common understanding of what boundaries are? And so just looking at that very basically, I'm not going to read slides to you. I think you can do that for yourself. But very basically, it helps us to know where I end and you begin, right? Or vice versa. It's just that simple space between us that is pretty important space, because if I don't know where that is, then I'm going to intrude on you or you're going to intrude on me. I don't know if you've ever been with someone who's gotten a little too close, right? Have you ever had that happen? Where, they're in your bubble, and our bubble is different. Every one of us has a different bubble space. So when people get a little too close, how does that feel? Yeah, it doesn't feel good. And so what do we tend to do? we back away, right? So same thing can happen with patients that we're caring for when we're getting a little too close to them. And how do we know where that boundary is? But knowing the clarity on where I end and you begin, or where you end and I begin, is really something that can help all of us to feel safe in the work that we do and to provide more excellent care for those that we serve. So the problem with all of this is that when we're in the kind of professions that y'all are in and I'm in as well, we're actually invited to cross boundaries, aren't we? We are. Who gets to do the things we do? I mean, when you walk into a patient's room, I can remember when I shifted from nursing to that year of hospice chaplaincy where I was determining whether or not I'd be going into ministry, I can remember how hard it was for me to sit on my hands and not rip off the covers, right? We are given permission to touch, to see, to experience with the patients we serve their lives in a very intimate way that not a lot of other people get to do. Even close family members don't get to do some of the things that we get to do. So we're invited to cross boundaries. And that makes it fuzzy for us. It makes it hard for us to know, well, where is that space then where I end and you begin? What does that really look like? What is that space between us? But when we're really unclear about those boundaries, what can happen is that we end up crossing those boundaries, not only in the direction of our clients feel intruded or uncomfortable because we get too close, but because sometimes we allow them to cross into our space as well. All right, so that's what I want to talk about, and that can be an endless cycle. So key to all of this is our own self-awareness, looking at that inner life that we have. It's just key to everything that we do as we're working with clients. And most often, we are so outwardly focused as folks who are in this medical kind of helping profession. Most often, we're so outwardly focused that we're not paying attention to what's going on inside of us. And that's why I want to talk about that some more today. So what are those factors then that really contribute to our vulnerability for crossing boundaries? Here's just a few that we can touch on lightly today. First, our family of origin. We all have one of those, right? So that plays a real part in how we work with those around us, and we'll talk about that. The second is our basic personality type. We'll look at that too. Mentioned already, compassion fatigue. How worn out are we? Likelihood is if we're really fatigued, really worn down by the amount of vicarious trauma that we take in as we work with those in our care, the more likely we are to cross over boundaries, not only with them, but allow them to cross into our own space as well. And then basic self-care. So are we doing it or aren't we? And what does that look like? And how balanced is our work-life relationship? So looking first at family of origin. So why do we do this? Very, 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 very early on, our patterns of behavior are established really early. It's when we're babies. Essentially, when we are first born, we don't know the difference between ourselves and our biological mother. We have been so intimately connected, we are one. And so when birth happens, there is still that feeling of connectedness to the other. So you see how this might play into boundaries, whether or not we make that differentiation over time, or whether we kind of get stuck in that sort of oneness place. So looking at how that works itself out, our parents play a key role, both parents play a key role in how we develop and end up with a sense of trust in the world, trust that our needs will be met, or a real sense of dependence on others that keeps us constantly seeking to have our own needs attended to. So when the baby cries, for instance, what happens? What happens normally when a baby cries? Somebody comes and does something, right? Someone comes, picks it up, begins to take care of the child. And the child learns pretty early, ooh, I can make a different cry and get a different need met. So parents begin to differentiate between a cry that says, I'm hungry, or a cry that says, I need my diaper changed, or whatever else, right? So we begin to have this responsive relationship between our primary caregivers as very young people, little kids. And when all goes well, and our needs are met, that's great, right? It's wonderful when that happens. We all know that life sometimes gets in the way, and it doesn't always happen as smoothly as it needs to. And sometimes the baby cries, and no one comes, right? Is that always bad? No. Actually, what it does is it helps a child as they're developing to get a sense of, oh, I can self-soothe, right? I can meet some of my own personal needs as well while I'm waiting for my caregiver to come. So it gives us a sense of our own autonomy, begins to develop as that happens. But when it happens too often, then we end up having this endless need to be cared for, right? We because our needs are not being met. So as we grow up, we end up mirroring a lot of the behaviors that we see around us. So if a child falls and skins their knee, and a parent comes racing to them all frantic, what's the child going to do? Freak out, right? But if a parent comes and soothes and says, oh, now it's going to be okay and let's take care of this, we learn to mirror the behaviors of those around us. And so when that happens well, we develop this sense of trust in the world that all will be well. But when it doesn't, we end up becoming more anxious. And as time goes on, we grow in our independence. So I don't know if you recall any times in your own, if your parents, or even in your own childhood, if you remember doing any of this. But I know for my kids, there would be times where, for instance, my son, when he was walking to school, as he grew in his independence, he would walk a little bit further ahead, and then he'd turn and he'd look to see if I was still there. And we'd wave, and then he'd walk a little bit further, and he'd turn, and he'd look. Or the toddler in the doctor's office when you're sitting in a waiting room who's playing over there with the toys, but then has to come back and touch your leg, and then goes back again. So we have this connection with those as we're growing up that helps develop who we are, and then how well we're able to differentiate as we develop our own personalities. So again, when that goes ideally, all is well, until we eventually differentiate and we become our own persons. And we know that we can get our own needs met, and we can do that independent of others sometimes, but also that there's an interdependency that is created. And this goes way on into adulthood. So what begins to happen to us is, if this happens well, we're able to distinguish the difference between where I end and you begin very well. We're well-differentiated people. And we can do that work, and we have a clear sense of our own personal boundary. But when it doesn't happen, for any number of reasons, our parents are all hopefully wanting to do good care, and we as parents want to care for our children well. When it doesn't work, though, there may be some illness in the home. Another child may have problems that takes a parent away from the other members of the family. So when it doesn't happen well, what we end up doing is constantly striving to get our needs met. And when that plays itself out in our helping professions, what we end up being at risk to doing is utilizing our patients, the clients that we work with, to meet our needs instead of the other way around. Does that make sense for you? Okay. So let me just share my own, I'm going to do a little self-reveal here. So I was born into a family where my mother suffered from depression. She actually was suicidal before I was born, and a doctor told her to have a baby. That baby might give her a reason to live. Yow. Ooh. Okay, that's my story. So how can you imagine that would be for me? Would there be a clear sense of boundary between my mother and me? No. And so all my life, I have been almost programmed to take care of someone else. In order to get my needs met, I had to take care of her, right? Her needs had to be met before my needs, and then maybe I'd have half a chance of getting my own needs met, okay? So what do you think that was like for me then when I became a nurse? How would I take care of my patients? Any ideas? Absolutely. I would meet all their needs before I would meet my own. Absolutely. Perfect answer. Hypervigilant. Eventually, I headed off to college, and my mother suicided. Yow. Right? So what do you think that's like then for me as I'm caring for other people? Can I leave them easily? No. So it feels to me like there's this urgency that I have to deal with all the time in terms of caring for other people, because what could happen if I don't do a good job? Something will go terribly wrong and they could die. All right, so this whole little talk about family of origin, I'm hoping this kind of example puts that in place for you. You don't have the same story I do, but you have your own story of your own family of origin. And the idea is to be able to pay attention to that and to see, how does that impact the way I offer care and where the boundaries are for me? Because for me, I had to learn, when this became a realization for me, that I was taking care of people more than myself, that this was almost programmed into me. Suddenly, it was like this giant revelation, and I didn't know if I wanted to take care of another soul on the face of the earth ever again, right? I had to make my way through a transition. I let my plants die that year. It was the only thing I could stop taking care of, right? My kids needed me, I was a pastor's wife at that point. I was a nurse. I couldn't, so what do I do? And so I had to really come to a realization that I don't have to take care of everything all the time. So my example, put your own story into the scenario there and think about what is it that's happened in your own life that might help you to keep really good boundaries, to know what that separation point is, or what's happened in your own life that you might need to continue to work on so you don't allow it to intrude on the care that you offer. Okay? All right, that's family of origin. We're going to look at personality type just a little bit. We're all born with one of those, aren't we? Okay. Because if you don't believe that, how many of you have ever worked in a newborn nursery? Anybody do that end of life? I mean, you're on the other end, right, in the work that you do. But newborn nursery, I saw one hand up there. And are there differences in personalities right off the bat? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very big differences in personality right off the bat. So we're kind of born into a way of being in the world. And that has an impact on the care we give as well. So I just put up a diagram up here. Does anyone know what that one is? Have you experienced this? What is it? It's an Enneagram. Anybody? How many of you have known the Enneagram model for personality? Yeah, so many of you have explored that. There's other ways of doing a personality inventory as well. This just happens to be one of them. And I pulled it up because actually there's 9 personality types in this model. We're all kind of one of them. And it's a way of really helping us to know how to grow and to be function on the highest plane that we can in the world. This is a very simplistic explanation of the Enneagram. But one of the types, and I don't know if I have a pointer on here. Yeah, I do, but I'm not sure I can aim it well. It's right here, the giver, and sometimes that's called the helper. I'm guessing. Now, I don't know if there's any scientific data to prove this, but I'm guessing that there's a disproportionate number of givers or helpers, number 2, type 2 in the Enneagram, that find their way into professional caregiving. Just my guess. I'm guessing that there's a disproportionate number of 2s in this room. And I am going to tell you that I'm one of them, right? So double whammy for me. I get the family of origin thing. And then My personality type is just to be a helper in general. So what happens, I mean, it sounds wonderful to be a helper, and every one of these personality types has its gifts. And they all kind of have their shadow sides too. So the helper actually finds self-worth in being able to help others. So I'm just going to read a quick definition. They are well-meaning and driven to be close to others, but can slip into doing things for others in order to be needed. All right, so that's where the shadow starts. When they are less healthy, they are the most highly invested in seeing themselves as helpful. And so I wonder why that might be a problem. What do you see happening there? If you're more invested in seeing yourself as a helper, what would happen in your relationships with your patients? Yeah, right. How? Yeah. The most important thing is your patient, not getting your own need met through the care that you offer your patients. And you know what? I'm guessing that all of us get our needs met by caring for the people we care for. There's a sense of, I think the work that you all represent is much more vocational than just a job, right? I think a lot of heads nodding. I served in professional ministry, but using ministry language would say, folks that do the kind of work you do have a sense of calling to it. It's not just a 9-to-5 go to work kind of thing. So we, I think, get our needs met by responding to a sense of call or vocation in our lives. That's a little different than feeling the constant need to prove my own self-worth as a helper, right? Proving that I am good enough by the work I give to someone else. And that's the shadow side of the 2 personality type. And I'm not saying you're all 2s. I'm just saying it's helpful to know what your personality type is and how that might play into the way that you offer care to others. Yes? Yeah. So the Enneagram, the best, and I don't know if I put it on your resources in the back, the best website that you can find to learn more about this particular personality inventory is the Enneagram Institute. So if you just Google Enneagram Institute, that's the site where you will find the folks who've done the most work on this, written the most books. You're going to find the best explanation of each type. And there are ways that you can do your free of charge, a brief testing kind of thing to see which type you fall in. And then how to be the most healthy personality type that you are. You can do, I've been in a couple of years worth of study on this stuff. And so you can go deep or you can snorkel on this one too. Yes. Enneagram. But there are other ways, other types of, Myers-Briggs. There's a very simple colors inventory. There's a lot of different personality inventories that you can do for yourself. The key here is beginning to recognize how your personality type is impacting the way you offer care and what it's doing to the boundary between you and the other. Okay? Other questions on that? All right. So I told you this wasn't going to be do's and don'ts. So the next area I want to just cover briefly is compassion fatigue. How many of you have ever really delved deeply into this topic? Do you know what I'm talking about by compassion fatigue? Okay, so another word that can often be used for this is vicarious trauma. When we're exposed over and over and over again to the pain of human existence through the lives of those that we are close to or those that we care for, we ourselves are impacted by that. And I venture to say that a lot of us just kind of mask that and just keep going. We keep pushing our way through, even though time after time after time we are impacted by the people we care for. So after a while, this builds up, and it's pretty hard to avoid. So I want to just share with you, first of all, Compassion fatigue puts us at further risk of crossing boundaries into the space of another, more so than if we're able to care for ourselves in the midst of that. So, just a definition for compassion fatigue: it's a state experienced by those helping people in distress. Would that be most of you, right? And it results in an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped. Does that happen sometimes to you? To the degree that it can create secondary traumatic stress for the caregiver. All right, so that's the longer definition of what we're talking about here. So I'm just going to give us a few signs of that so you can begin to pay attention to, is this something that's happening to me? Because I think as I said before, we tend to push our way through. We tend to ignore ourselves and keep caring for others, even when we're feeling some of these signs. So let's just take a time out for a moment and just get a sense of what are some of these signs. So first one is that sense of feeling helpless or hopeless. That sense of, I might be working my butt off, but I'm not really making very much of a difference in this world. That can be a sign of compassion fatigue, feeling personally responsible for outcomes for other people, instead of knowing that the outcome really of anyone's life is really up to them, and we get to play a part in that, but we're not responsible for it. So, and then sometimes we can feel like a failure when the outcome doesn't match what we hope for them. So that all feeds into this feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that we can have. So a sense that one can never do enough. Ever get that one? I get that one. So I can't ever do enough. And we confuse that with our ability to accurately really assess ourselves. What is enough? When do we reach enough? To know that I can be, do, and have enough. I didn't put it on the resource sheet, but Wayne Mueller writes a book, Having, Being, and Doing Enough. Great author, great material, recognizing that we can't do it all. And so having a limit, this is all about boundaries, right, to what we do in the lives of others so that we know that we really have done enough, and don't continue to strive urgently for more. Diminished creativity. This is one we probably don't even recognize happening to us, but when we are experiencing trauma after trauma after trauma and are overloaded with the pain of others, after a while we become less creative, and we might not even notice it creeping up in our lives. We become less relaxed, and when we're less relaxed, naturally creativity doesn't flow as well as it would if we're more relaxed. So we might feel bored or joyless, and that just completely diminishes what we're able to creatively do, and that reduces our ability to solve problems, to do problem solving with folks, and keeps us stuck in kind of black and white, this thinking where we don't have this open space for other possibilities in our own lives or in theirs. Which is another way of kind of saying that we're unable to embrace complexity. It's about becoming more rigid, less open, more narrow-minded. That can happen when we're experiencing compassion fatigue. Hypervigilance, that's a big one. That's the one I talked about with my mother, and the way then that I would care for others. I experienced trauma with the loss of my mom. And so then that created this hypervigilance in the way that I continue to care for other people. And so when you have this constant layering of stress that you have from the care of so many people day in, day out, you can just kind of ratchet up instead of being at a sort of baseline level of being able to know what your boundaries are and what's going to be effective out there for you and for them. You kind of ratchet it up and become more hypervigilant. And kind of always feel like you're on instead of have that off space. I don't know if you kind of, when you go to work, you have that feeling of clicking on, right? And that doesn't go away. You're constantly on. So minimizing or trivializing, that's when we, after a while, lose our ability to have empathy. We've seen so much trauma that after a bit, we have trouble empathizing with folks because there's just so much out there. And that then applies to ourselves. We have difficulty empathizing with our own need or even recognizing that we are experiencing some trauma in ourselves. This one, very common, chronic exhaustion. Just always feeling bone tired, soul tired, just tired. And that sense of obligation that I got to keep going, I got to keep doing what I'm doing, this just never-ending kind of thing, and vacations don't even take the edge off anymore, just tired. Sometimes that plays out in bodily symptoms, somatic symptoms, backaches, migraine headaches, high blood pressure, so things to watch for. Ooh, I see some smiles over there. The massage therapists are ready to help, right? Well, if this keeps going, we can end up with a sense of persecution, and none of us really want to be that way, but sometimes we just feel like we don't have the agency to change our situation. And so after a while, I can feel like a victim. I'm stuck in this constant need to attend to other people's needs, and then where am I in this? And I get lost. And so we become the victim after a while and feel persecuted, and it's really all our own fault, but we don't know how to get out of it, right? So that's kind of what happens for some. Some people feel guilt. That I think goes with the not being able to do enough, right? So I don't know when to leave the patient who is dying. Should I just stay a little bit longer? And I will feel guilt if I don't, so I will just do it. And then and that happens all the time, right? So this constant need to continue to address what's going on and guilt if you don't do it. So cynicism, that can happen. That's kind of the way we deal with anger and frustration. So if we're not able to label what's going on within ourselves, it can come out in cynical ways. And a lot of times that's sarcasm, the way that might show itself up. Uh-oh. Yeah, okay. And then just numbing. This is, I think more of us probably experience numbing than anything else. It's when you feel like you're a sponge that's absorbed about as much water as it can possibly hold, and therefore you block out even your own feelings about things. And so we're just going through the motions and taking care of folks and just kind of, I see laughs and smiles. But just, we do that, and we just kind of push our way through. And then after a while, it's like we only feel most alive when we're attending to one crisis after another. So instead of finding ways to be alive when we're just in our own personal life. And the last one, most of us wouldn't really want to claim this one, I don't think, grandiosity. Most of us don't, and I wouldn't think anybody in this room would feel grandiose. But here's how this shows up. It's when we lose perspective and think we're the only one who can do the job. Does that happen sometimes? We're the only one. I'm the best person for this particular patient. No one else can do it as well as I can. And therefore, I need to push my way and cross the boundary, not just of that client or patient, but of myself. All right? So that's what grandiosity looks like. I love the work of Rachel Naomi Remen. She's a physician. I'm getting some head nodding. She wrote Kitchen Table Wisdom. She wrote, what else did she write? My Grandfather's Blessings. She's written a whole ton of articles. Great author. Anyway, she struggled with her own illness, Crohn's disease, and so she's written a lot about her own struggle. And so one quote that I really like of hers is, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. All right? So if we're sitting here denying the fact that we ever experience any of those symptoms that I just shared with you, I think that might be what we're doing. We're trying to walk through water without getting wet. The fact is we do experience these things, and sometimes we need support and help in making our way through them so we can be as healthy as we can be for the sake of those we work with and for our own sake and for our family's sake. So Another quote I really love is, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. So I think we really have already talked a little bit about the fact that, I'm missing a slide in here, that if we don't take care of ourselves, we risk using others to get our needs met. I think that came up a little bit earlier. So Cindy, I think you said something like that before. So self-care has many, many flavors and varieties, and that's why on that self-care assessment form, it covers so many areas of our lives, our physical bodies, the way we take care of ourselves. I know when I was nursing, very often I would skip lunch, or I'd forget to take my break. And I was told really early on as a nurse that nurses have trouble with their bladders when they get older because we don't take our breaks and attend to ourselves, right? So physical care, and not just the basics of eating and, going to the bathroom when you need to, but also what do you do in terms of exercise? How healthy is your diet? Are you getting good care from a physician? Those kinds of things. Not just taking care of yourselves physically, but for your mind. Are you doing things to stimulate yourselves intellectually? Are you reading? Are you keeping up with latest things? Are you attending workshops, even if they are mandatory? Oh, darn. And I don't know if this one was, or if this was just an option for you. But I know when I do this for clergy, it's all mandatory, and they sit there, not too happy about even being there. So what are you doing to stimulate your mind and caring for yourself in that way? Spiritually, are you attending to your spiritual nature? Are you enjoying beauty? Are you connected to other people other than the ones that you are working with? Are you, is there a sense of sacred in your life? And how is that expressed? How do you experience that, take that in? So there's a bunch of choices on that self-care assessment that you can look at in terms of spiritual care. Social care for yourselves. Are you so busy taking care of other people that you're not able to be with your family? Are you missing some of the great events in your children's lives, or extended family because of your work? When we do that, we're so much more at risk of continuing to just kind of go down this cycle of crossing boundaries to get our own needs met. So I'm looking at Jan. She's my timekeeper back there. What do I have? 5 minutes left for the whole 15. Okay, good. So all of these things, mind, body, spirit, emotions, relationships, are all ways that we can attend to ourselves and then can be more healthy not only for ourselves and those we love, but also for those that we serve. So I'm just wondering if you can share, is anyone willing to just share popcorn style ways that you care for yourselves so that we can get a sample of some of that out there? What do you do for you? Yeah. A mean Monday. What's a mean Monday? Yay for you. Congratulations. That's great. Other ways. Get a massage. A regular massage. Yeah. That's great. Feels good. I can remember having a massage one day and crying because I had been so busy taking care of everyone else that it just felt incredible to have someone tend to me. Yeah. You crochet. Yay. Awesome. What does that do for you? Right. Yeah, you're focusing on something else. Your mind is not occupied then with, all the stuff you should be doing or whatever. You're just enjoying that. Yeah, feels good. Other ideas? Jan. Yep. Excellent. Gravitating to the life givers. Especially those of us who are personality type 2s may need to think about that, because sometimes we gravitate to the people who are the most needy of us, right? So that we can do that giving thing all the time. So if we can begin to gravitate toward people who bring life to us, who fill us, that's awesome. Great. Thanks, Jan. Others? Any other ideas? Wow. Dancing in the rain with your grandsons. That sounds like fun. Yeah, what'd that do for you? Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Brought joy. Yeah. And you know what? When you're sitting here talking about it, I get that from you too. So it's not just last night. You live with that memory of that as well. Yeah. Other ideas, things that you've done. So the reason I'm asking this is that if your inventory of ideas has run low, look, you can go out and dance in the rain. You can get a massage. You can crochet, So other ideas that you want to share? What's that? Yoga. Wonderful. Yeah, that takes care of a lot of these all at once. It kind of incorporates that body, mind, and spirit. Yep. Piano lessons. You're taking piano lessons. You're learning a new creative thing, right? Awesome. Great. All right, so thank you. I think we could probably do a lot of that sharing. Please do that with each other, because you have great ideas, and it's just so much excitement when you think about the ways that you can keep yourself healthy. So you know what? I'm just going to give us a quick scenario. That's the slide I thought I was missing. So let's just look at this for a minute. If you were sitting around tables, I'd probably ask you to turn to people at your tables, but even just to turn to one another, just read this one with me. You have been working with a patient who's actively dying. You have become particularly close to this patient and her family. Your shift is coming to a close. You know that you should go home to your own family. Yeah, but that on-call person or that next person, you know that they're new. And they don't know the patient or family like you do, so you're struggling with whether you should stay. All right? Does that ever happen? Oh, yeah. Okay, that happens. So, looking at that, just turn to somebody else and think about what factors might lead you to stay with this patient after your shift ends. What might be going on in someone who decides they need to stay? What are the implications for other staff members if you do, if you stay and care for this person beyond the boundary of your shift? And how might you care for yourself in this situation? Just turn, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, that's all. And let's just look for some responses from you. Okay, danger in letting you talk and getting you back together is the tricky thing, right? Always. So a lot of animation, a lot of conversation, a lot of energy in the room right now. What's come up for you? What are the things that you talked about briefly? Guilt. Guilt comes up. Leaving when there can be guilt either way in this decision, can't there? Right? I feel guilty for staying because I'm leaving my family. I feel guilty for not staying because I'm leaving my patient. Right? Yes. And then leave. That's helpful to the person who follows you as well as to the patient and their family, right? We talked a little bit about that here, because you could end up feeling like, oh no, death looks like it's imminent. This is active dying I'm seeing here, right? I'm going to stay for this extra however many hours, and guess what? 8 hours later, the person's still alive, right? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you. So a warm handoff. And we talked about, even if you knew that death was getting closer, even perhaps working on scheduling creatively to have a person who may be a covering person actually visit with the family, so that there's a relationship that starts, if that's possible, right? So yeah, I'm down to 5 minutes, and I'm really wanting to honor your time because I know it's important. So just briefly, 1 or 2 other things that you talked about in the room. Yes. So look around the room, honoring the person who comes after you, honoring one another, recognizing the gifts that others have to bring, that it doesn't have to be you. And their turn will come to honor you one day as well. So, yeah, thank you for that. Anything else? I told you we'd be skimming the surface of this. We could really dig into this for quite a bit, just looking at some of the things that might have actually been going on within the person to cause them to want to stay, right? Their own personal family of origin issues, personality issues, their own compassion fatigue, all of that stuff could be playing into whether or not they choose to stay or whether they are willing to say, you know, I'll be with you in my thoughts, but it's time for me to go, and I'm going to hand you off to someone else who can take good care of you too. Okay. All right. So, question I always like to consider when we're looking at boundaries, and this sort of sums it all up, is whose need am I meeting? Right? Whose need am I meeting by staying right now? Is this really the patient's need? I might think so, or I might confuse their need for my own. So recognize it, just being able to explore that question. If it's to meet my own need, to be needed, or to be the caregiver, or be the one who's the greatest hospice, whatever, for this person, then maybe I need to be thinking about where that's coming from, how that's been shaped in me, and whether or not that it's absolutely true that I'm the only one, that grandiose thinking, that I'm the only one who can do this job right now. So whose need am I meeting? I'm going to go back to, as we kind of close up a little bit today, I want to go back to one of the things that's really helped me to really get a sense of my own personal boundaries is to ask, am I helping, fixing, or serving? And this is Rachel Naomi Raymond again. And you can see the differences between these three as she spells them out. There's a great article. You can find it on several sources out there if you just Google helping, fixing, or serving in her name. But I'm going to just read a couple little quotes from her because I think it's important. Helping is based on inequality. It's not a relationship between equals. When you help, you use your own strength to help someone with less strength. It's a one-up, one-down relationship, and people feel this inequality. When we help, we may inadvertently take away more than we give, diminishing the person's sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Helping. Fixing. We fix broken pipes. We don't fix people. When I said about fixing another person, it's because I see them as broken. Fixing is a form of judgment that separates us from one another. It creates distance. And so when we're really trying to be close and care for someone, when we come at it as a fixer, we're actually creating more distance between us and them. Now, when I help, I am very aware of my own strength. But we don't serve with our strength. We serve with ourselves. We draw from all our experiences, our wounds. Our wounds serve, our limitations serve, even our darkness serves. The whole in us serves the wholeness in the other and the wholeness in life. So when we think about the work we're doing as service rather than helping or fixing, we end up with a real sense of satisfaction and gratitude in the work that we're doing. We don't feel that sense of exhaustion, that never-ending, I can never do enough. We may help or fix many things in our lives, but when we serve, we are always in the service of wholeness. And that wholeness is not only offered to others, but it comes back to ourselves, wholeness in ourselves. I just love the distinction between those three things. And I think if we can go into the work we do, thinking about those distinctions, it can help us not to cross over into space that actually is intruding on their bubble, their personal boundaries, and allow us not to go so far as to intrude on our own by the work that we do. So just a minute probably left for questions. Do we have any questions? And then I want to take you back to your care plan that I asked you to start with. there's some resources that I've listed for you. There's many others. Just gave you a little tiny bit. But any questions that have come up or any insights that you want to share? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. That is awesome. Well, and actually that you brought up systemic changes, because I think you're right. Taking care of yourself can just feel like another to do. Darn it, I have to do this, another obligation. So, and can take the joy out of even what you're doing for yourself. So, my thought is that when we caring for ourselves is never lost on the world. When we attend to our own personal needs, we reflect back a more whole presence that we can offer others. So first of all, it's our own mindsets on that. You know, am I doing this obligation for myself just to say I was healthy this week? Or am I trying to be as whole as I can be so that I can give that to the world? So that's one. The systemic stuff, that one is trickier, right? Isn't it? It's creating an environment, a culture where you're all recognizing the importance of this and finding ways systemically to boost that, right? So, and I don't know what your system needs in order to do that. You probably have some ideas. Yep. Yeah, yeah. And that is a challenge. And if you can, but you can all have an impact on that. And so I think the problem is that sometimes we feel powerless to change the systems that we're a part of, but you can all have an impact on that. So I'd encourage that. I don't know if I have any people here who would object to me saying that, but I'm going to encourage you to use your collective power to help one another to make that cultural shift so that you are providing the best of yourselves to those you care for. Yeah. Selfish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. It's a lot of, yeah, this is a huge topic, this whole thing. It is a lot of work, and it begins with each person individually working on themselves and understanding that this is not selfish work that I am doing as I'm taking care of me. I cannot put the oxygen mask on another until I am fully alive myself and breathing, right? So, so knowing that to the core, not just knowing it up here, but knowing it deeply enough that you're willing to make those adjustments in your own personal life to attend to yourself will provide a much better caregiver to the world. So I believe that with all my heart. So, and the systemic stuff, that's something for y'all to kind of work on together. So it's hard. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So even the difference between hourly and working for a salary, right? Yeah. Creates different levels of stress in that. Yep. I don't know who here has any ability to work on that system. I don't know if there are any folks in the room who have that, but strongly encourage so that support for each other in the midst of that. So you bring up some really good things. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I can stick around if anybody wants to chat at all afterwards, but I just want to, if you're willing just to as we close, just to take a moment to either close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, or just kind of get into whatever position would help you to go inside. All right? So downward gaze, just an opportunity to just go inside for just a moment. And as you're thinking about your work, all of the many things that you do in your work, I'd like for you to just focus on some things that you do really well. Pick one thing that you do really well, that you feel really good about. Something that you want to continue to do. And you want to continue to do it well. Just think about that one thing. And then I'd like for you to shift your attention to some of the demands that get put on you, the things that you do, either out of your own guilt or out of a sense of obligation, or just the way the system works itself. Something that you feel like you're obligated to do, that you do all the time, but you wish you could just stop. Something you wish you could stop doing. What would that be? And then finally, just reflect on what is it that you would really like to do, either in your professional life or in your personal life, that you have simply been unable to do, that you really want to do. And then make a commitment to yourself to look at those three things. We tend to come to things like this and then go, and that was nice. But then we go back to the same old stuff, right? So if you could just make some sort of commitment to yourself, a way to check in with yourself on your progress on those three things we talked about, whether it's writing them down on the self-care assessment and care plan that you were given, or find some other way. Maybe it's even sharing it with someone else so that they can help hold you accountable to what you really want and desire for your own life and your work. And that would be it. We went just a tad past our time. I want to thank you for your participation. You were great to work with. I feel like I came home being here with you today. And thank you, Jan, for getting this all lined up.